Well, thanks everybody for coming. Like Danielle was saying, is my name is Ben Fisher. I am a Google Business Profile Diamond product expert. And here's a little bit about what we're going to be going on today, talking about today. We're going to be talking about, of course, Google listings, Google profiles, and kind of how they impact the franchise landscape. There's a lot of different things that we're going to cover, but feel free to ask questions as we go along, and that shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. So a little bit about me, kind of like what Daniel was saying is as a Google Business Profile Diamond Product Expert. What is that actually? I'm just going to explain that very quickly because when we are talking to people in the franchise space, they go, well, isn't that just like being a Google partner? And the answer to that is actually no. Anybody can actually become a Google partner. It costs about $10,000 a month in ad spend, and bang, you're a Google partner. With becoming a Google Business Profile product expert, you're helping you're helping the community, you're helping Google. And Google reaches out to you directly and they say, hey, we would love for you to come and help us help the world, basically, or help the community, answering people's questions and just helping out in general. What it allows us to do is allows us to basically work directly with all of the product managers over Google Business Profile and really help steer the product, which is a great benefit I think to everybody, because we have to understand the guidelines, we have to understand all the rules, and more importantly, we get to really, again, we get to help impact the product. An example of this is like last week, I was at London Google HQ for our for the Product Expert Summit, and got to sit down with a ton of the people who run the product. They own the product. Got to make some good suggestions that you'll end up seeing in the product probably in about 6 months to a year. So it's a lot of fun, and it gives us, kind of like Jenny was saying, is kind of unprecedented level of access to Google. And so I like to say, in the nicest way possible, when you're talking to somebody like myself, you are basically talking almost directly to Google. So that's the nice thing. All right. So the importance of Google Business Profiles. As a franchisor, you know that if you're doing anything in local, having a GBP for your franchisees is paramount to their success. On average, 80 to 90% of new business is driven basically by your Google Business Profile. Whenever somebody does something and they're searching for something and they have local intent, they're looking for, an HVAC company, a garage door company, or a local storefront. They're going to type in, maybe something near me, or they might just type in, say, plumber, or plumbing repair, for instance. And they're going to get 3 results, basically. And those 3 results are going to get the majority of the interactions. So having your GBP really humming, good, going, and problem-free, more importantly, is extremely important. So, but the thing is that things, of course, do change. The algorithm changes. The local algorithm actually has changed at least 3 or 4 times this year. And understanding those updates when they happen and being able to see the effects basically before it causes a problem is extremely important. One of the things that I like to say is that if you're ever kind of wondering, well, oh my God, is this update affecting me? Usually a good place to go and find any of us who are in the local space is going to be on, believe it or not, Twitter. There's also a place called the Local Search Forum. So localsearchforum.com. I'm over there as well. And a lot of my peers are over there. And we get to kind of see issues kind of crop up usually well before most do. And another place you can also go is into the Google support community. So which is support.google.com/business. If you're starting to see things kind of happening and you have a question and you want to ask the community, you can come to the community and say, hey, we're starting to see this type of thing occur. Is this a trend, basically? Now, let's talk about GBP and the problem that a ton of franchisees have. And that is missing reviews. This is one of the biggest issues I think that a lot of franchisees will see, is that they work very hard to get reviews, and those reviews for some reason will not show up on their Google Business Profile. And this happens for a lot of different reasons, but it's usually going to boil down to the AI that Google is using to evaluate the content and the context of these reviews. And basically, Google's deeming that the review is it's violating one of their guidelines. It's extremely frustrating too, because usually a customer will say, well, I left you the review. Here's a screenshot of it. And the franchisee will say, well, that review never showed up on my profile. That's going to be issue number one. Issue number two is basically going to be when you have, say, 1,000 reviews that you have on your profile that people have left, but you wake up in the morning and you've got 900 reviews. Well, Google does sweeps. And again, these are all kind of AI algorithmic controlled. They'll do a sweep and they will basically delete hundreds of reviews sometimes at a time. And unfortunately, I have to say it this way, this is actually normal. So, but all of these issues can be resolved, meaning that you can attempt to get them restored. And before I go into the how, I want to make sure that I mention something, kind of a thing that you can do proactively. And that is let your franchisees know, or do it at the franchisor level, at the Azure level. And that is make sure that you are screen capturing. Sounds crazy, but make sure you're taking screen captures of every review that comes in, or you're using a platform that actually backs up those reviews in some way or another. And another thing that you can do, and this is a little bit more of a pain, is you can have your franchisees, when somebody does leave a review, you could try and collect those screenshots from customers. It's not very practical though. The reason is that when we're dealing with missing reviews in either of these ways, they can be recovered by coming to the GBP community and basically saying, hey, my customer has left this review. Here's a screenshot of that review. Can you see if it can be found? And those can be escalated and sent over to the contacts over at Google. And then Google can basically go ahead and see if they can find them. 90% of the time, they're going to be able to actually find them. Even with the missing reviews, they will also restore those as well. Just takes a little bit of time. So, and on the topic of reviews, one thing that when I'm doing consulting with franchisors and franchisees is I like to encourage you to look at reviews and think about them in this way. When somebody leaves you a review, that review is really important for the person who's coming behind them. They're thinking about doing business with you. And so if you always think about your reviews in that light, then you start understanding that you need to really respond to every single review, positive and negative, and even reviews where they've left you no text whatsoever. So let's say somebody leaves you a 4-star review. Well, how are you going to reply to that, right? There's not a lot of context behind it. But the context is that it's a positive review. So somebody did have a positive experience with you. It wasn't the best experience, but they had a positive experience. So you could reply in such a way to say basically, hey, John, thank you so much for leaving us the review. We really value your feedback. While you didn't share what your experience was with us, we see that you might have not had the best experience in the entire world. Please reach out to us at blah, whatever your email address is for customer service, and we'd love to talk to you more about your experience. And that is basically giving somebody the opportunity to understand that you really do care about that review. You care about giving the best level of service possible. And that's your entire goal there, by the way, is you just want to show the next person in line how you treat customers. So I would encourage you to do that and find a good mechanism on doing that, whether it's at the franchisor or at the franchisee level. All right. So let's talk a little bit about AI, AI specifically in reviews. And one thing I would definitely say is that, utilizing AI is great for scalability. This is extremely true. Um, AI can be used, in my opinion, as a wonderful assistant, but it should never replace what you're doing. And what I mean by that is that, of course, you should never leave a review that was AI generated, right? Actually, Google does not like that whatsoever, so don't do it. You can get your reviews removed if you do that. As far as the review responses go, Google's actually okay with this. They haven't come out straight and said this, but they are okay with this. There's a caveat, though, to it. What they don't want you to do is just say use some piece of software that is going to write a review response and then just let it go. Like, don't even read it. Just generate, publish. And I know that's probably what you think you need to do because of the amount of reviews that you're dealing with on a daily basis. But realistically, somebody needs to be there and somebody needs to be able to edit those reviews and read the review responses. And that's what Google wants. Google wants a genuine review response, not automated. So, but you can definitely use AI to help kind of fill in all of those words. Because again, I mean, if we get it down to it, reviews with no context, it's really difficult to write, to come up with something unique to say every single time. And you definitely don't want to repeat yourself either, right? So, so I think personally that yes, you can use it in your replies, but definitely make sure that you are putting some kind of editorial control in when you're doing that. And that comes to anything, by the way, when you're doing anything with AI, writing blog posts, writing Google posts, things like that nature, it's okay to use this as an assistant. All right. So let's talk about ranking factors. This is the thing that everybody asks is when it comes to a franchisee, what are the ranking factors? And so I'm going to just put this out there. There's only 4 ranking factors actually when it comes to your Google business profile for local. Everything else is going to come down to the organic side. And that is basically going to be number 1, it's going to be the name of the business itself. So whether you have like a geo modifier, like a city name, for instance, in your Google business profile, or having other types of keywords, like again, going back to plumbing, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, for instance, those keywords are actually pretty important. There's a lot of caveats to this though, because the guidelines state that you have to name your business as it reflects in the real world. And so when it comes to franchisees, the rules are pretty much the same. And when we're doing like audits of franchisors, or working together with franchisees, they always want to, put these keywords into their business name. And I say that's fine as long as you do it within the guidelines. And how you do it within the guidelines is you need to make sure all of your signage and all of your legal paperwork actually lines up. The name and the address must always match. If not, you can get a suspension. We have a lot of franchisors that come to us where, a lot of their network basically has gone dark, meaning they've been suspended. And it's usually because a lot of franchisees will go rogue. And the franchisees will start creating new profiles, or they'll start just stuffing keywords into their name. Well, unfortunately, this trickles up to the franchisor level, not just down to the franchisee level. And so what can end up happening is Google will basically get, in a sense, warned by getting these franchisees are getting reported by other marketing companies or competitors. And then Google will do a sweep basically of as many of the profiles that they can find. And again, this is all AI controlled. And when they do a sweep, they're going to identify the individual profiles which are not in compliance with the guidelines in one way or another, and then they will just suspend them. So like I had this one franchisee that came to us. They were a vent with they did vents basically, and they had 160 units basically. Out of that, 70% of their units went dark and got suspended, and it was all because they had franchisees who were basically stuffing keywords in their names. And it took probably about a good 3 months actually to get all those profiles restored. So I really would say that at the franchisor level is that you have some kind of something in your agreements with your franchisees that basically says, look, if you want to make any kind of changes, to specifically like the name of your profile, that it needs to be approved at the franchisor level, because it can not only hurt the franchisee, but it can also hurt you as well. So that's the name. The second thing is going to be your category. Think of the category as who you are, not what you do. It's very important if you look at that, you look at it in that way, because that's how Google looks at it. So, and you can choose as many subcategories as you want, by the way, as well. And those subcategories, but they should always be something that that it's what you do. And try not to put categories in that are not what you do. The next one is going to be reviews. Reviews are extremely important for ranking. Those first 10 reviews, when you're launching a new franchisee, those first 10 reviews are critical because that's actually going to give you a nice little ranking boost. Then it's 100. After that, it's kind of an unknown quantity, but your basic rule of thumb is you want to have more reviews than your next following competitor. That's really what it comes down to. After that, it's going to be the local landing page that you are linking to. And this is where, having the pages that are on the franchisor website is more important than, say, launching their own domain name, because now you're sharing in the organic benefit of the franchisor. And then finally, after that is going to come to the services area of your Google Business Profile. Service area this is actually pretty new within the last 6 months. But basically, if you're adding services that align with your categories, not necessarily leaving the content of your website, then those services can actually start to cause you ranking within about 72 hours, actually, of when you add them. So there are custom services, there are services that Google's going to recommend, and I recommend that you absolutely go through those, make sure that those are things that you have your franchisees or you do as a franchisor, make sure those are being populated. And those can be duplicated, by the way, among all of your franchisees. So it doesn't have to always be unique content. Okay, so basically when we're talking about blocking on Google Maps, we're talking about suspensions. And a lot of things that we could have an entire session on this, but Google basically is really trying to protect the consumer, but also protect the merchant at the same time. And so what they're looking for is anything which they consider to be fraudulent or misleading information. And so we've kind of already talked about like the name of a profile, right? And how this, stuffing keywords into a name can cause a suspension. But realistically, it's like any aspect of your profile can cause a suspension. Editing your profile can cause a suspension. I see it all the time where franchisees will go in, they'll edit their name, their address, or whatever category, hours, and they'll do it rapidly. Well, that causes something called red flags, which can cause you to get removed from Google Maps. And what we're really going to focus on is kind of more how to get back onto Google Maps, because it speaks to what can cause you to be removed from Google Maps. Basically, infractions of any of the guidelines can cause removal. And when you are trying to get back onto Google Maps, there's actually a ton of steps that you have to go through. And what we have found out is that after reinstating probably well over 6,000 Google profiles just in the last year, is that only 4% of franchisees are actually prepared to get back onto Google Maps. And I'm sure that you, especially if you're in the service industry, you've probably experienced this, where one of the franchisees gets suspended. They're calling you and they're basically saying, I've been removed from Google Maps. You need to get me back onto Google Maps. And they're crying every single day that they're losing money. This is all a reality. They are definitely losing a lot of revenue. And but they're not really prepared to get back onto Google Maps. And what I mean by prepared is maybe their signage actually doesn't have the full Google Business Profile name. That's number one. Number two, it's like I've seen some people submit signage where it's something as silly as somebody literally taking a Sharpie and writing their name on their door. That's not signage. Oops, sorry. Excuse me. There we go. So, but then the next thing is like other types of documents that Google asks for. They ask for things like business license or utility bills to prove the existence of the existence of the business itself. Almost universally, businesses are not going to be prepared to provide either the business license or the utility bill. Utility bills usually, if they're operating out of their home, for instance, are usually going to be in a person's name, not in the business name. Business licenses. As a franchisee, they might have it in their incorporation name or their LLC name, but not in the DBA's name. And unfortunately, Google is actually looking specifically for this. So what does that mean? That means that basically, if you're trying to get back onto Google Maps and they're asking you for, say, a utility bill or a business license, and you don't have it as a franchisee, then now you're going to be down for at least a month while you're trying to get this information. And that goes for things like Secretary of State entries, again, incorporation documents, leases, things like that. So one of the things that we do is we try to make sure that every franchisee that we work with is prepared and has this information ready to go, just in the eventuality of when you're going to get suspended. Because it's not an if you're going to get suspended, it's going to be a when you are suspended. All right, so the next thing is expanding your location. What a lot of franchisees and stores don't understand is that you can actually expand beyond one location. Again, it's just kind of how you do it and doing it within the guidelines. One example I have of this is a garage door company that I worked with out of Orlando, Florida. And they wanted to cover the entire area that they served, all of their zip codes. So they had one location when they started. And then they were like, well, can we just, put up another location at, say, one of our contractors' homes, or things like that, which no, you can't do that. That's actually against the guidelines. You have to have authority over the location that you want to expand to. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up creating a store for basically a showroom model where they would have their contractors working out of a showroom when they weren't on the job. And we ended up creating about 16 locations over the period of a year. When we were done, they dominated the entire market. On top of that, they were able to actually launch around 16 local service ads as well. So they were dominating the pay-per lead space too. So what I would recommend is that if you want to expand your location, you can definitely do it. But you so have to make sure that you read all of the guidelines first, because there's a lot of different guidelines that you can break when you're doing this. And when that happens, then Google can, of course, suspend your businesses. All right. So the next thing is how do you talk to your franchisees about this and get them to understand that their GBP is so important, and really at the end of the day, what they again shouldn't be doing. And really what you need to again understand the guidelines, number one. But number two is trying to make sure that the franchisees understand that if they make too many changes to their Google business profile, that can cause them to be removed. Again, that's the biggest thing that they really need to watch out for and understand. And I see a lot of franchisors. Well, every franchisor is different, right? Sometimes you control all the marketing. Sometimes you have preferred vendors, and sometimes you just let the franchisee control all the marketing. I highly recommend, again, in your agreements, that you have very specific guidelines for your franchisees, that the naming convention should be X, Y, and Z. For instance, X of Z, area, that's an approved terminology for the business name. On top of that, give them other types of guidelines, again, about replying to reviews, how they should reply to reviews, have a document that they should follow. Give them the information, basically, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that way you're going to reduce the problems that they can incur. And the next thing is that, again, give them guidelines and say, we would love for you to be able to, say, upload 1 image per week. Your Google posts should be, say, no more than 80 words, should always have a good title, and should always have a call to action. And give them a framework for this, kind of like you probably give them frameworks for social media posts. And I can just guide them basically on what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Tell them that, once the profile is set up, they should not touch the name, the address, phone number, and that's it. Basically, they can definitely change their services, their hours, posts, photos, reviews, etc. But tell them what not to do, and that if they want to change their address, that there is a specific protocol and process for it. Process is really everything when it comes to Google Business Profiles. So an example of this might be is that you have a franchisee, they're going to be moving location A to another city, but before they move this location and touch the Google Business Profile, they need to update all of their legal documents first. They need to update those utility bills, business license, things like that, their Better Business Bureau listings, their Chamber of Commerce listings. Everything needs to be basically updated, and then they can go ahead and do the move. Okay. So, and I think, yeah, I believe that with that, we are actually done, Danielle. So I'm going to stop.
Effective and right on time. I love that. Thank you so much. No, I mean, very much quite the enlightening session. It's obviously very clear why so many people value your expertise. We had previously, before the summit, kind of set up on LinkedIn a Google form where people could submit some of their questions, and we will definitely send those to you and then send your responses out to all of our attendees, as well as to our audience. If you had any specific questions, I see ones popping up here. We will gather them all together. I'll shoot them over to Ben and make sure that he answers you diligently and thoroughly.
Would you like me to answer Jay's question there real quick?
I mean, yeah, sure. By all means, if you're ready to go, I always just try to give everyone.
Oh yeah, no, I love lightning. I love lightning questions. Yeah, I'll tell me when to stop. I'll just answer. Let's see. Actually, let me. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with Jay. If you buy a business and change the name, is that okay? So the answer there, Jay, is yes. You can go ahead and you can change the name. You want to inherit the reviews that come with that Google Business Profile in the first place. Those are extremely important. You also want to inherit the ranking capabilities of that profile. So you want to definitely hang on to it. But again, you want to make sure that you have all of your documentation in place for that business before you make that change, because there is a possibility that it will get suspended. Don't worry. If it gets suspended, everything is recoverable. Okay. So that's number one. I mean, anybody can get reinstated, I guess is my point there. But yes, I wouldn't start a new profile from scratch, because then that means you're permanently closing the other one. And realistically, Google wants you to probably keep that one. The rule of thumb is with any business profile is that as long as the experience is the same, then keep it. That's basically the rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast, but it is kind of what you go by. So anyway, yes, keep it. Make sure you're good to go. Change the name. Let's see. All right. So Bill's asking, we have customers review the local GBP of the franchise that provide the service. Is there a way to aggregate all the reviews? Okay, so that's number one. Is there a way to aggregate reviews across multiple local profiles? And so number one, if you're asking, is there a way to aggregate reviews, say from profile A to profile B and profile C into profile D? The answer is going to be no. Or if you're asking that, is there a way to aggregate those reviews into, say, some review software, so that way you can manage them properly? The answer is yes. There is absolutely software out there that will do it. Gather up. You've got Birdeye, which is my favorite. You've got Podium, of course, very expensive, but is partially owned by Google. So yes, these platforms will aggregate those reviews into one location, so that way you can respond to them all. And there's tons of other platforms out there as well. So, as a matter of fact, I think you all have a platform that does that, right? I believe so. Yes. So, okay. So, how can new small franchisees benefit from hundreds, thousands of reviews given to a large established franchisee? Not sure really what that question is. How can new small franchisees benefit from hundreds of thousands given to largest? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. Sorry.
Ben, if
Okay.
I can clarify real quick, and you
Yeah,
may have answered this already,
sure.
but if we have like a new franchise that starts, they're obviously starting from scratch. I'm wondering if, there's another franchise in a neighboring town that has hundreds of reviews. Is there a way for them to kind of get a head start and benefit from
Oh,
the reputation of another franchise?
the answer is probably going to be no. Okay. And again, it comes down to experience, right? Um, you can't necessarily, I mean, I guess you could technically. You could technically, I guess, blast all those people out and say, hey, would you like a review over here? But that actually wouldn't be good because that would be against the guidelines. And that would be one user leaving a review on 2 locations, which actually is against the guidelines. So you wouldn't want to do that. So I guess the answer is technically no. Um, and there really is no benefit for, say, a new franchisee and having somebody next door that has, thousands and they've only got 10. Really, the answer, Bill, is to just work on getting reviews for that new location. That's really all you can do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problems. Good question, though. All right. So the next one's from Olivia. Is there suggested frequency for how often edits should be made? Great question. Also best practice for setting up a GBP for a new franchisee location. Okay. So suggested frequency for how often edits should be made. My suggestion there is going to be 1 edit per 24 hours. Now, there's a caveat to this. The real answer, by the way, and how I at least do things, is I will make an edit and then I will wait until that edit's actually accepted. And then I will make another edit. But I don't want to suggest that necessarily for you to do, because that also, if you don't get the timing right, and also if you're making too many changes, then you can absolutely cause a suspension. If you, even by following that kind of rule, you can cause a suspension. So when I'm talking to franchisees or ZORs, I say 1 per 24 hours. It's excruciating. It's really tough to wait that long. But in the end of the day, being suspended is just not worth it. The amount of revenue that you're going to lose is not worth it. If you want to do 1 and then wait till it's accepted and then do another, great, no problem. But if you're doing like 4 or 5 changes, no, definitely you need to space those out very much so. The secondary part of the question is any best practices for setting up a GBP for a new franchisee location? All right. So best practices. Number 1, service areas cannot overlap. That's a big no-no. That means county, city, zip. So just think of it as you can't have any duplicates is really what that means. And so so just number 1, that's the bigger thing, right? And so if you're managing like 10 locations, I suggest having a spreadsheet so that way you can keep track of all of these things and keep track of all of the zip codes and location and service areas that you have. The next thing is that make sure you're following the proper business model. Whether you're showing the address or not showing the address, Google knows the address, by the way, whether you're hiding it or not. So make sure you're following the proper business model. Do you go see customers or do customers come to see you? Obviously, we all want a pin that's on Google Maps because we're going to get better ranking. So just make sure, kind of like I was talking about with the whole showroom aspect of things, normally a plumber doesn't have customers come see them. But in the case of a showroom, absolutely it works. We actually have an entire service around just basically around protecting and launching new profiles for franchises. So feel free to contact me afterwards if you have any kind of questions, and I can help guide you. So yeah, and then the next thing is that as a franchisor, when this is the big thing I would really recommend for your franchisees is this. I was just talking to one of our clients about this last week. They basically, what they found out is that franchisees would just open up locations and they would open up their Google business profile without even having any signage. And so one of the things that I recommended to them to do is to go ahead and actually just, whenever a franchisee wants to open up a new location, the franchisor will just send them the signage, basically. Like, here's your vinyl signage. Go ahead and throw that up on a window. Now you have signage. Perfect.